What's the sound couple's biggest concern with each gig? Surprisingly, it's not the gig. In reality, it's making sure we actually get to the gig. The reason is simple. If we are unable to arrive, there is no show. Hey everyone, this is Bart with the Sound Couple. In today's tech tip, we are going to cover arguably the single most important thing you can do for your business, and that's maintaining your vehicle. After all, the gear doesn't matter if you don't show up. For the regular viewers of our channel, you're familiar with our trusty old 2001 Chevrolet Express 3500. We know exactly how this vehicle sounds, how it feels, and reacts. If something ain't right, we take action. With our busy season fast approaching, we want to do everything we can do to make sure our van is ready for the long year. So let's start out by talking about vehicle maintenance. Well, even if you have limited knowledge of vehicles, there are some basic tasks you can do or learn. Let's cover some common maintenance that most people can learn or do themselves. Number 1, be proactive. Familiarize yourself with your vehicle's owner's manual and service intervals. Even if you're not going to do everything it says, you should at least understand the recommendations. And number 2, check all the fluid levels that have a dipstick. This includes transmission, power steering, and most importantly, your motor oil. Also, make sure you're periodically checking the oil levels between oil changes to ensure the oil maintains its proper level. If you take your vehicle to an oil change center, don't trust them. Pop the hood afterwards and check the oil level yourself. Make sure they place the oil filler cap back on nice and tight. And last, you should check under your vehicle to make sure that there are no leaks. Number 3, we always perform a front end lube job. The steering on our van still feels very responsive, and we have yet to need any major work performed on it. A grease gun and a tube of grease is a wise investment for us. Number 4, check your tire pressure and keep them inflated to the recommended levels. And don't forget to check the spare tire as well. Also, understand your vehicle tire specifications. For example, our van requires 50 psi for the front tires and 80 psi for the rear. Finally, replace your tires if they are low on tread. If you can see the top of Lincoln's head, it's time to get new tires. Number 5, fill your windshield wiper fluid and check your wiper blades. Most of us are doing plenty of night driving, and driving through a sea of bugs is common. Number 6, how's the battery doing? How old is it? If your battery is more than 5 years old, just replace it. I have lost count how many band member cars we have provided a jump to over the years. Don't be that guy. Number 7, vehicle lighting. I can recall about 5 or 6 years ago, Stacy and I were driving back from a gig late at night. We lost a headlight. This was hugely stressful for our drive home. We made it back safely, but quickly concluded that we can't be placed in that position again. So I immediately looked into adding supplemental lighting to our van and added these bright fog lights. And last, check your air filter. We check our air filter at every oil change. Next, we'll turn our attention to maintenance items that are generally required to be performed by a vehicle service center. Let's focus on expected maintenance. Tire rotations. To get the most life out of your tires, rotate them, and this is usually easier done at a service center. With a serpentine belt, that powers your power steering, your alternator, which charges your battery. That's another thing that can get forgotten about, and it should be checked and replaced at least at 80 to 100,000 miles. And then another thing is a coolant and transmission flush. Some people do this themselves. I prefer to take it and let a mechanic do it. And the other thing I prefer a mechanic to do is brakes. Brakes are something I don't want to mess around with, and they're very important. Unless you have somebody that has experience doing it, I wouldn't suggest doing that job yourself. Next, I'd like to talk about caring for and actually listening to your vehicle. How do the tires feel on the road? How does the steering wheel feel? What sounds are you hearing at different speeds? What does the motor sound like? Look at the dashboard. Where are the gauges at? You should familiarize yourself with all of these, and if something changes, that may indicate there's a problem manifesting itself. Now, I have a few examples to share with you that demonstrates just listening to the vehicle has helped us get through some things that could have turned into a big deal. A few years ago, Stacy and I were heading out of town for a gig. I noticed after the vehicle was warmed up, I could feel that the shifting changed behavior. I could feel the shifting transmission through the floorboards, which was not normal. Well, that turned out to be the early signs of transmission failure. The van ended up needing a new transmission, but we caught it early and replaced it before a major failure occurred. At a different gig, it was a very cold evening, and when we went out to start the van at the end of the night, the only thing we got was a click, click. Thinking that it was the battery, we called AAA and the service tech ended up wrapping a hammer on the starter. After he did that, the van started and homeward we went. We didn't mess around and purchased and installed a new starter right away. The last example that I'd like to share with you is that there was a period of time where I noticed that our voltage meter was not staying consistent on the dash. The battery tested fine, so the next likely suspect was the alternator. Since this vehicle is older, it simply made sense to replace the alternator without even questioning it. Alternators are not extremely expensive. We were able to replace it ourselves, and the problem was solved. Finally, I'd like to share with you some additional tips in regards to your vehicle. Number 1, wash and clean it. If you notice, our van always looks clean. When you arrive to your gig, your vehicle is the first impression and is a reflection of your business. Number 2, flat tires. Oh boy. What are you gonna do if that happens? The time to find out is not when you're sitting on the side of the road with a flat tire. Practice changing out the tire with the spare at home so you can familiarize yourself with the process. Number 3, carry jumper cables. Fortunately for the sound couple, we have used ours more for others than ourselves. Number 4, check for any fluid leaks on the ground where you park it. If hoses are loose or become brittle, and you're leaking antifreeze or your oil filter is not properly seated, they will leave that evidence behind. Number 5, now this is something that I think a lot of people don't think about or know, and that is to keep your gas tank filled, and there's a couple reasons, really good reasons. We never leave our van parked with less than a half a tank. And the first reason is because you never know when the unexpected happened. Last summer, and we have a video on this, we had a gig we weren't aware and quickly needed to rush out the door. The last thing we wanted to deal with is not having enough gas to get to the gig. The second reason, if you have a fuel pump that's submerged in the tank, the fuel is what keeps the tank cool. If your fuel pump burns out, that will likely leave you stranded on the side of the road. Number 6, our last tip is to have a backup plan. What are you going to do if your vehicle experiences a failure? I will share our plan with you to give you some ideas that will hopefully help develop your own. So first of all, in our situation, our van is dedicated for gig purposes. So there are periods of times where it'll sit here for weeks. If we have a gig coming up, I will go out hours or even the night before and just start it up and make sure that the van is ready to go. Secondly, and this is a really important one, is that we carry AAA towing. It has saved our butts at a couple critical times. Another thing to consider is what happens if you have a complete failure. In our case, we fortunately have a couple personal larger vehicles that we could get the gig done if we had to out of those. Well guys, I hope these tips were helpful, and if anything, it'll get you started to think about a topic that we don't want to think will happen. In 27 years of being in bands and gigging, I have never not made it to a gig, and the plan is to maintain that streak. I would love to hear from you on any tips we may have missed. Did we really miss anything important? Until the next time, we'll see you at the next gig.